and all of you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. And my name is Matt Patel, one of the three co-founders here at Malbec. Malbec is a modern enterprise CLM solution company. We've got over a couple of decades of CLM background coming from a prior CLM company before Malbec. And today we're going to talk about how legal ops teams and CLM platforms can solve this ongoing challenge sometimes with sales and legal working together on contracting. Sales loves CRM solutions. We're going to talk about Salesforce primarily today, but everything applies to HubSpot, Microsoft Dynamics, CPQ solutions, different tools that sales uses. So with that said, let me advance to this next slide here. And we will talk about industry standards and what typically sales is focused on and how legal is supposed to support them. When you look at sales productivity, they work very hard on account management, working with prospects and customers to negotiate the upfront quote or the products and services and pricing. But in many cases, there's the last piece, which is the contract, something that needs to be reviewed and signed. Especially on enterprise contracts, it's not simply just read a link that you send out and sign. There's probably some legal terms and conditions. So their first priority is being able to request very quickly. I've got all this data in Salesforce across the account, opportunity, quote, proposal object, contract object, so many different ways you can handle your Salesforce configuration. But after all that data is set up and all the terms and conditions are calculated in the Salesforce record, I don't want to spend time drafting an email to legal or filling out another intake form that legal may have put in front of me because I've got all the data already in Salesforce. I want to click a button and generate that contract that I can immediately send out to my customer or the counterparty. So that's the first use case the integration would tackle. And of course, in a few minutes, you're going to hear from Mandy about what they have done at Block to significantly boost sales productivity. All of this happens without leaving Salesforce. That's the key, right? Salesforce users don't want to go to another system to fill out another form. At a click of a button, automatically the contract is generated. But what exactly gets generated? Well, that needs some flexibility. You need configurability in the CLM to generate the master agreement, but with variable clauses. Not every contract is the same. You might have enterprise deals that need additional exhibits or clauses. Smaller deals may not need the extended language. So the system needs to be intelligent enough to take the data from Salesforce and build that contract instantly. That includes possibly a DPA, a GDPR content, clauses, exhibits, special warranty and maintenance terms. Whatever it may be for your business, the system needs to know what it needs to include in the draft and present it right away to the sales rep that's working this deal. The next thing that happens is sales wants to be able to control some of the business terms. How often do you get into a situation where a draft is presented, maybe with your standard marketing, right to use your logo, or I'll be able to, terminate for convenience, or other standard language. And the sales rep might say, you know what, this customer will never agree to this. Do you have any alternates? And by having that option, sales can automatically swap clauses on that draft agreement or even during negotiation to be able to self-serve without having to depend on legal. And in a minute, you're going to hear from Mandy about the amount of time legal has saved by making this more self-service. Not only self-service options to swap clauses, but we're in this era of AI. And if I didn't mention AI at least once in this call, something's wrong with me, right? There is concept of AI here as well, especially when a counterparty sends back red lines with language, let's say on the liability or indemnification that is legal centric, and the rep might want to know, okay, how bad is this red line, right? Is my legal even going to look at this and approve it? Wouldn't it be nice for AI or Gen AI to read this and turn it into simple English for me so I can understand what they've done? And based on that, maybe I don't even need to bother legal. I can push it right back to the counterparty saying, you made this unlimited cap or other things that my legal is not going to agree to. So that's the control part with AI usage and self-service options. Last couple of things here. Collaboration is key. How can sales, legal, finance, customer, all of the people involved in this entire review work together on a common platform? And with the right integration, sales can stay in Salesforce, legal can stay in CLM without requiring a license to Salesforce, saving you money there. Because some of the older products, I remember 10 years ago when I used to be in this space, and if you build it on a Salesforce platform in a certain way, it requires a Salesforce license underneath it for every single user. So in current day and age with modern platforms, there's ways to avoid that double licensing. A legal person can work in CLM, sales can work in Salesforce, collaborate without requiring everybody to have a Salesforce license. And this is where online collaboration, everybody working together in the same document, tagging each other comes in handy, really expediting the cycle time. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Mandy, analyze. At the end of the day, once you have a contract in place and you have hundreds of contracts in place, analysis allows you to streamline and improve your processes. Is it working? Are you actually efficient, gaining efficiencies? And can you report on the data week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter to show legal and sales productivity? And again, I know I've said a lot here, but Mandy is going to talk about real life example and what kind of benefits they have been able to achieve using the integrated application. So with that, all of that said, I hope much of this resonates with you, especially if you worked in this space with legal, working with sales on CRM and CLM solutions. What I've shared here is what we see common across the industry, different companies using Salesforce and Malbec together. I'm sure there are nuances in your own use cases, but overall, this is what the technology is trying to solve for the business users. So Mandy, I'm going to ask you to chime in here in terms of, before we get into your actual ROI and metrics that we will share in a couple more slides, what was the process like before, and what have you done lately with the integration?
Sure. So I will touch on these 5 points a little bit. You shared some really great details. For the request process for our sales and partnerships team, we were doing it manually. We were tracking it manually. There wasn't an automated process for it before. So for our sales and partnerships team, it is now easy as clicking a button in Salesforce to create a contract. The sales team is able to stay in Salesforce, as mentioned. For building, the contract really begins creating magic on the back end based on the fields that are already entered in Salesforce. So it starts to create a template for them. It'll swap in the clauses, the relevant data, and it really ensures that they're not entering it multiple times. So no one likes duplicated efforts. That's a really important part of this. The control part in legal, especially legal operations and the rest of the legal team, I'm able to configure guardrails to help the teams move faster, but safely. So I lock down permissions like editing a document where I need to, but I'm also allowing edits for other data fields that we're a little bit more comfortable with changing. And I can allow for swapping clauses like marketing rights or other stances we may have for different clauses. That collaboration piece that Matt was discussing. So sales, partnerships, legal, finance, anyone that may need access, you're able to configure their permissions. Anyone can comment and collaborate on the contracts directly in Malbec, but they can access it from their own systems. So we talked a little bit about sales staying in Salesforce, partnerships staying in Salesforce where they're comfortable, and legal staying in Malbec, where you're able to comment back and forth, ask questions. But the comments are there for the auditing purposes that we really care about. We're able to keep everything related to the contract with the contract. And then that very last piece, before we dive into more details, I'm able to create reports and allow teams to create the reports themselves on data that's relevant to them. So what's nice here is that I can really slice and dice the data that's relevant to each team, ensure they're able to get it on a regular cadence, and I can set it and forget it. So if I want to have them check it in real time or get it sent to them weekly or monthly, I'm able to set that up and then I don't have to go back. If they want more data, I'm able to pull any of the data fields that we have available. And Melbeck has a cool feature where we're able to even check SLAs, really analyze that data more in detail. I can see how many times I've used a specific clause. Using some of that AI is a game changer. So
And
those are my 5 points before we dive in. Thank you.
yes, and I think the metrics and some of the ROI we will share in two more slides will be an eye opener for many folks. I also love the way you were able to say, like, you or legal ops, I can do this, I can do that, because that is powerful. I remember the days, again, some of you might be still working with IT or the Salesforce admin, or maybe even the vendor who has to provide some of those custom services. Well, now you can put the legal ops person in charge, right? Mandy is able to configure and respond to changing requests instantly without having to deal with either the vendor or technical resources that are busy, right, or have a cost involved in it. So it's more self-service to be able to pivot and respond to business needs as they evolve. So before we look at Block's actual usage and how they've evolved from manual to now and the future, I want to highlight some baseline functionality, just configurations that hopefully many of you are already doing this or have thought about it, but I want to level set in terms of what exactly it means to integrate Salesforce with a CLM solution. First thing is mapping the data fields. You don't want the sales user to have to re-enter any of that information that already exists in Salesforce. And that includes any documents. So the integration needs to be bidirectional so that you can pass all of the account, opportunity, quote, and other object information into the request that generates the contract. Not only that, but what if you have an exhibit or a DPA or something that you've already gotten from the customer, or maybe even a third-party paper. In some cases, you might be dealing with their paper. Being able to automatically move that from your email or from Salesforce into the request so that when the contract is drafted, it includes that in the overall package. So that mapping is the first exercise. And again, we allow that to be done simply by legal ops person being able to map it right from the user interface. The next thing is a little bit of intelligence in terms of what exactly gets included in that draft contract. So again, I'm sure there's a boilerplate that you have that has all the standard language, but how often do you have those little yellow highlights or a comment box that says, use this clause if it's a large, high-value deal. Otherwise, remove this clause. You'll have notes like this in your manual template, right, in the Word document. And then you have to, of course, manually remove that language if it is a large value deal in the manual world of contracting. Well, in the automation here, the system should be able to do that. So if we know the value is above $1 million, let's say, and if the customer is in EU or Europe, and it's in a highly regulated industry, well, automatically include these clauses as well as these exhibits so that your overall contract package has everything that you need to send to your counterparty. Third bullet talks about workflows. Workflows doesn't mean just creating an approval chain where you send it to all the different folks, because that's how process was done. Whenever a contract comes in, legal and finance and VP of sales and everybody needs to review it. What if you don't need to review it? What if nothing has changed? It's your boilerplate, standard terms, customer hasn't even argued with it, right? They've not redlined anything, in which case the automation of the workflow is basically moving it right to signature. And again, Mandy will talk a little bit about how much time they have saved on legal by doing these things, where the workflows are automated to only bother legal or other departments based on what changed in the contract review by the counterparty, possibly, or what terms have changed. Triggering approvals at the right time is key because you don't want to miss a step and end up with non-compliance. If certain term is changed or the customer has asked for a provision that is not ideal, you need to ensure the system will push it to the right folks for approval and not miss it. We want to avoid rogue contracting. We also want to avoid end users just from copying, pasting from a previous contract. So having those approvals will ensure risk and compliance, and your legal folks being able to sleep better at night, right? And lastly, as the contract moves to signature, Salesforce should not get outdated. They need to have the latest data. So if you've negotiated anything, let's say the payment term or even the product or pricing, if that ever happens in the contract negotiation, being able to put that back, right, in Salesforce, push it to Salesforce so that any reporting you do in Salesforce is accurate. And also sending the signed copies back to Salesforce in the attachment will allow you to have all of that data in sync. And this will ensure that both systems are talking to each other and being able to ensure data is accurate on both sides at any given time. So we'll jump into the block or square story next. But Mandy, from your configurations, anything else you have done, any of these items that you've taken care of that in your current configuration?
The biggest one here is driving the dynamic clause language. So that's really accelerating the business. We're giving them our drawback clauses, our standard terms, and able to move a lot faster. So we're automating it based on data fields already in Salesforce. So again, no duplicative efforts for the teams, and able to have that language already ready for them, where they don't need to go into the contract and edit the language. It's able to be dynamic enough where it understands if this data field is selected, this clause is going to appear in the contract. So that's been really cool.
So then let's talk about some of the creative configurations and what you've been able to achieve in this next slide. So for this one, I'm actually going to let Mandy speak first, and then I'll add some thoughts afterwards.
Sounds good. Thank you. So, Matt, I'm definitely able to sleep a lot better lately with this configuration. And like Matt was saying, no red lines. Our guardrails are in place. Let's get the contract out. So I want to talk a little bit about what we have done at Block, what we've been able to configure, and how it's working for us. So at Block, formerly known as Square, we've been using the Melbeck sales integration to accelerate our contracting for our partnerships team for about 3 years now. So we've been utilizing the data fields to really build a contract template. We were talking a little bit about swapping out those clauses, and we can even make region-specific changes, rules. I mean, the options are really endless. You can choose different things based on different data fields. So recently, in the past few months, we were able to launch a sales order form for our SMB team. So our small and medium-sized business teams for hundreds of our sales members. So the goal being to really remove that legal touch point from 97% of our agreements. We wanted to really allow for more self-service, again, with the correct guardrails still in place. So it took a little brainstorming, because how can I give hundreds of people permissions to send out a contract without needing additional touch points? Easy. Standardize the terms, lock down the permissions, and make it as intuitive as possible, and keep sales in the system they're comfortable in, Salesforce. So Melbeck's Salesforce integration allowed my sales team to stay in Salesforce and click a button to create a contract. They don't need to go outside of Salesforce. They don't need to enter data anywhere else. Melbeck is right there. So it feels the same to them. They select what team they're on, and all the data that I need pulls into the contract. It really creates it like magic for them. So if they need edits, which that happens, not everyone accepts every term that's on a contract. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. They have a send to legal button available for them. So at the very top of the page, they see send to legal, and all of the data that's already approved in Salesforce is pulled directly into the contract. So legal can communicate back and forth with sales if needed, and it makes everything seamless. I don't need to stress about anything getting changed or a data discrepancy between the systems. We're also able to push data back to Salesforce. So Matt was mentioning a little bit about, the status. We can also push in other data fields. Any field that's in Salesforce, we can push it back. So date contract was signed, PDF copy if needed. So this has saved our legal and sales team so much time, as you can imagine, that I've been able to use this example alone for my legal tech ROI portfolio. So showing our return on investment. I think in times like now, it's more important than ever to show the cost savings and understand how our processes, our tools, and our systems are helping accelerate our businesses. So, how are my tech projects and systems saving time and money? I put a dollar amount behind someone's time because your time equals money. And I calculate the time that it took prior to using the integration and after. And the results for this are amazing. It has saved our sales and legal teams so much time to be able to give them the option and access really to get these contracts out faster. And again, making me feel comfortable that we have all the guardrails in place, the permission settings set up, um, again, accelerating our business. I will pass it back to Matt.
Thank you, Mandy. So we heard quite a few things here. These metrics are significant, right? Let's talk about the first one for a minute. And some folks might be like, really, wow, yes, it actually is possible. 5 days to 5 minutes. How is that possible? Well, first, if your process required manual intake form entry from sales to request a contract, and legal or legal ops to be, the bottleneck, or maybe the contract admin to be the bottleneck because they get so many requests, and you get the request and they have to manually draft the contract. Well, it could be a few hours, a few days in order to be able to respond back to the sales user. By the integration and the automation, it's instantaneous. So that's the reduction in cycle time for sales as well as legal. When you talk about 97% legal touch point, is that primarily because, Mandy, you were able to remove the redundancy in approvals and provide self-service to the sales team to be able to use the right clauses and not have to have legal review everything?
Yes. So that really started with standardizing our terms. So a lot of the requests that our legal team were getting were small data points to change in our order form. They were really seen as like the final approval to double check that all the data points looked accurate. But if
Mhm.
you're pulling in the data points from Salesforce, there's no need to do that. As long as the contract terms are standardized and you're able to swap things out, they're able to send those out. So again, when we locked down those permissions and allowed for all those data fields to come in, we had the contract ready. So we had pricing points on there, we had our marketing rights on there, we had all the data that we needed to get the contract out, and all we needed was someone to send it out. So that allowed sales to move really quickly. They didn't need to ask legal, hey, can you just take a look and make sure the data points match up? They were able to send it out themselves. So when they were ready, they clicked send. And when it was done through our integration with our e-signature platform, It came back into Melbeck with a signed agreement. Everyone was notified. Everyone was happy.
And for the few that that are the out of the ordinary, let's say the counterparty wants to redline, negotiate, that's where you're really focusing your time on, right? Rather than every single agreement, only those exceptions. So so that's where legal would get involved, or even other departments, depending on your workflow, would get involved.
Yes.
Um, Talking about this lower this box here on in the middle lower part, how do you administer the changes? So do you, I'm sure you have a team of Salesforce admins or sales operations that are handling any business changes to Salesforce, but that could impact your configuration. Does that happen often at Block? And if that happens, do you have any governance or a process where they notify you and then you have to reflect those changes on the contracting side?
Yes. Great question. So we do have a Salesforce team. We do have an IT team. Our Salesforce team focuses on making updates as needed. So I'd say weekly, bi-weekly, they're making updates, maybe adding fields, changing a few things. They put in a request to me to let me know, hey, this field changed. And I'm really looking for the name of that field. So in any system, there's a name that we see, and then there's a backend name that we don't see, which is called the API name. So they gave us the API name. I plug it into Melbeck, and it's done. So that really takes me a few minutes, but don't tell them I told you that. Um, to help us move a lot faster. It's very easy for me to set up. I'm able to go into my template, add any data fields needed on the fly. And again, it really only takes a few minutes, unless we're changing something significant where, we're changing a clause and we need to think about how we're doing that, why we're doing that. But the dependencies for the Salesforce team, we're really just looking at what those fields are called.
And that the time saving is, again, I'm not gonna you mentioned it to this crowd at least, that it's saving you a lot of time, but that's not to say that you have a lot of spare time on your hand. You have other legal technologies, right? Not just CLM to maintain. So point being, it frees you up to focus on other tasks on your plate, and not have to worry too much about Salesforce changes impacting your contracting process.
Exactly. We do have a lot of systems to maintain. So even though this may take a few minutes, there's a lot of other things, but I'm able to say, yes, we can do that and meet other timelines where I'm not a blocker either. So I don't need to go to IT and have them make specific changes or wait for the sales team until they have resources. I'm able to make those changes directly, or someone on my team is able to make them. It's really intuitive for them to be able to understand how to do that. So we're able to do it on the fly.
And then the last part is sales effectiveness. Maybe we can talk about it now or the next slide, but the analytics. So what kind of, you mentioned they ask you for reports. You configured several things that they can do, self-service. What kind of data do they ask you for and get from the systems, Salesforce or Malbec?
So they're really looking to see the amount of deals they closed, understandably, the status of each contract, the date contracts were signed. They want to see the SLAs. How long is it taking? So that we can really measure how long it used to take and how long it's taking now. Is there a lag time between the time that they created the contract to the time that they sent it out? There's not. And we're able to show that. We're looking at volume month over month, year over year, and we're able to create those reports again in Melbeck. So they're able to get a lot more data and a lot more analytics from Melbeck's reporting now. It's amazing. So they're able to utilize that and again get it in the cadence that they want. They can check it real time, they can check it or have it sent to them weekly, monthly. So it's really convenient.
And because you're pushing data back, as well as the documents to Salesforce, possibly they are used to reporting out of Salesforce as well, right? On the reporting engine that Salesforce provides directly.
Yes, there are specific sales managers that want the reporting from Salesforce. So they're able to get that data. We're pushing data fields back, like again, the date the contract was signed, the status of the contracts, And we could push any data back. Those are just the ones in particular that our team cares about right now, but there may be different ones in the future. So being able to add that in on the fly later on when they need it, I can make those changes pretty quickly.
Okay. One thing, I don't know if you faced this yet, but some of our other Salesforce customers, during the contract review process, they might have a change to the quote or the account or the opportunity because maybe the customer says, you know what, we need to add a few more units of such and such product or services. And, and it requires that contract to be refreshed or updated with the latest changes in Salesforce in flight. So rather than having to recreate a whole new agreement, being able to take the changes out of Salesforce and update your contract terms, which possibly could reinitiate the workflows because now you just changed the terms of the agreement. Not sure if you've reached that level of complexity. Is that something happening now or expected in the future?
It is. So we do refresh to make sure that it's not in the status that it's being sent out for signatures when we're adding the updates. So again, that we have that data integrity piece, bringing any approvals that we need to make sure what's in Salesforce is reflected in the contract. And there's no mix match of the two.
Got it. Okay. So a lot of actual insights into what's happened so far with your rollout. I think the next slide talks about the vision as we look ahead here. So let's talk about current state. Your focus was to roll this out earlier this year for a smaller group, show success story, and then grow into a larger team. So can you talk a little bit about the journey here?
Yeah, sure. So our current state right now, we have rolled it out to hundreds of our SMB team members. I did see a question in the chat for the 97% reduction in legal touch point. We're using order forms, so it is our paper, but we do plan to launch more for the sales team, more types of documents where we do expect heavier red lines in the future for other types of documents where that touch point may change. But the reduction in time still is there. We're able to really measure the success by the data points that we're pulling. So the reporting is showing us the SLA time. So how long is it taking us from contract creation, negotiation, sending out the contract until we have an active contract fully executed in our system? Short term, we're planning on rolling it out for CPQ and internationally based on the needs. And long term, I think really to better analyze the data, we want to use more AI. I think everyone's really curious about AI, hyped about AI. We want to understand what's been done and how we can evolve. We want to continue to measure our success, get better at what we're doing, get faster.
And currently, you have a single instance of Salesforce, right?
We have multiple instances.
Oh,
We
you
are
do?
integrating with one instance today.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. I saw a question earlier on chat, but definitely the technology supports multiple instances. Is that something you plan for other departments?
yes, it is. We do plan to roll it out for other instances. Right now, we have a couple instances that we are using, just not in production. So 1-to-1 in production, and then 1-to-1 in stage. In our staging environment of Malbec, we're integrating with our staging environment of Salesforce. Similarly, in our production environment of Malbec, we are integrating with our production environment of Salesforce. But we do plan to roll it out to others.
And that's typically, I'm going to see who asked that question, but it's a valid question. And we see that often, especially when there's a lot of M&A activity. You acquire a company and they already have their own Salesforce instance, and merging all of that into your primary instance is not an easy task. So most customers end up continuing to use multiple Salesforce instances, which is, from experience, we've seen that. So when we designed the Salesforce platform integration with Malbec, that was a key requirement for us. So essentially, you can connect as many Salesforce instances as you like to a single instance of Malbec CLM. and then configure your templates and workflows and data mappings to each of them. In fact, you can even have a single MSA template and workflow tied to multiple Salesforce instances, and the data coming into that MSA could be different from each instance, so that every instance can request that MSA, but you're getting a consistent legal contract, if you like. So there's a lot of opportunity here to consolidate if you ever have that situation of multiple Salesforce instances all creating different contract types, and then legal having the nightmare of consolidating all that. So through configuration, you can certainly set up that level of functionality. And CPQ, whether you use the standard code object in Salesforce or a CPQ solution, the integration with CLM is designed to be at the Salesforce object level. So it doesn't matter. We're pretty agnostic what CPQ you use. Oftentimes, I've seen that quotes change. Maybe when you present multiple quotes and only one of them gets approved, and that's the one you create the final contract with. So there's some flexibility there in case anyone else is running into this for your own use cases. And then when AI comes into play, I mean, of course, Salesforce itself has intelligence that they're rolling out on the CLM side with our AI and now the Gen AI components. If I just focus on the sales user use case, I would say that the most important thing for a sales user is what I mentioned earlier. When a counterparty sends back a red line document, it's nice for a sales user to know exactly what they changed and what is the impact to their business before I send it to legal, because again, there might be certain changes that I just know my legal will never approve. So do I want to waste a cycle? What if I just want to push back on my customer saying, you made this change, I know my team's not going to accept it, can we talk? So by using Gen AI to provide simple English translation of complex legal language that we have, as well as some guardrails to tell you what's possible and what limits your legal team has set, allows sales user to move much faster with the use of AI. There's some questions, Mandy, we can even answer them in real time here.
Sure.
But the last one I see, Victor is asking, when are you planning to roll out to other instances? That's your longer term journey, right? Over the next few months or next year?
Yeah, that's really going to depend on the business side getting the processes together. So I walked them through best practices, really what our current state is, what the future state will look like, and give them a few different options of how we can make that happen. But it's going to be standardizing more terms, trying to automate, clean up our processes before we could start rolling them out. And then we also always check with the resources and dependencies of other teams. So is the Salesforce team also ready to build this out with me? Can they add a couple fields on their end? Should I add them in Malbec? It's really flexible where if you have all the fields, or say you have 50% of the fields you need in Salesforce, and the Salesforce team says, look, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time right now to add anything else. Well, I can add those fields in Malbec so that we're still not duplicating anything and that we're able to get the contracts out and roll out more instances. So we're able to do that as needed. It's just really going to depend on the business, the other teams, because there are some dependencies when we're rolling out new instances.
There's also the technical component. Salesforce may be rolling out new fixes or updates over time. Malbec, of course, is rolling out its own. One of the things from an integration architecture standpoints we had to do is productize it in such a way that there's minimal impact to that middle layer that connects Salesforce and Malbec, so that whenever Salesforce pushes its updates, it doesn't break your integration. Whenever Malbec has a new release, it doesn't break your integration. And maybe for a minute, we can talk about, Mandy, what does it take for you to maintain not just the field changes, but are you ever, when we have a new release on the Malbec side, or when there's something maybe a major update on Salesforce happening, which if they tell you, is there anything that you have to do to ensure everything is working smoothly, or do you have a process in place for those changes?
Yes. If there is a change on the Malbec side where, there's a new version of the Salesforce integration, I let our Salesforce team know. They're able to make those updates on their end pretty quickly. So they may be changing the managed package license or something on their end very quickly where they're plugging and playing. We're doing the same on our end. So if there's an update or if I need to change the instance or something major was updated, I'm able to go into Malbec, into the integration piece of it, and update whatever's needed. So I do a refresh if any fields are added. I quite literally click a button that says refresh to bring those fields in. And if the consumer key or the consumer secret or the API keys are changing, I'm able to copy and paste those into the system and use them. Um, so I keep a great relationship, as we should, with our business partners and our Salesforce team so that I'm aware of any updates. I let them know why I need to know of any updates, and we keep in contact in case we need to make those changes. And again, a lot of it is copy and pasting keys into one system or another, but there's not a lot of manual work that's going to go into that.
So you mentioned refresh. I'm going to share a funny part about that feature when we were designing it many years ago. And then we'll move into questions as well. I see a couple more come in. So certainly a good time to spend the last few minutes here answering questions. But refresh is an interesting feature. And let me, Mandy, you mentioned that. Thanks for reminding me. That's an extremely powerful and a very time-saving feature. So in reality, some of you may have experienced Salesforce with CPQ or not will have all of the different fields in your account, opportunity, quote object. And you map it to your MSA, order form, NDA, whatever contracts you're going to generate from Salesforce. But then sales team decides, oh, I want to add a new, target account field or a new payment term option or a new product or service that requires a certain clause to be included. How will Malbec know that a new field was just added to the quote object or the account object? And that's the refresh piece that Mandy is talking about. By refreshing literally with a click of a button on the user interface in Malbec, we will take the latest changes in Salesforce behind the scenes and present that for the legal admin to configure that new field to your template and to your workflow immediately. It doesn't require any magical work behind the scenes on the CLM side or API work. It's very, very seamless. And it's something that is important because one thing I know, Salesforce changes often, right? It's not like you set it up and then you stay with the same fields for a whole year. There's oftentimes new fields being added, some fields being removed. And so it's an ongoing update on the CLM side to keep up with that. So that's the refresh icon or the button that we have in Malbec. Makes it a lot easier for legal admins to keep up with the Salesforce changes. Okay, so let's take the last couple of questions I see, and then I'll move up. What challenges, common roadblocks do organizations encounter? So Mandy, as you prepared for this, did you do any prep work for the sales team to know this is coming? Any tasks that you took care of? Any lessons you learned that, oh, if I had to do this again, I wish, I did this or that?
Always lessons learned. I try to level set expectations in the beginning of what we can do, what's possible, and the options that we may have. So I think the biggest challenges or common roadblocks that we're going to face with implementing Salesforce CLM is always going to be the change management piece. But if you are keeping people in systems they're comfortable with for things like this, for an integration, and you're explaining the story of how we are going to make things faster, why we are doing this, and getting early champions, trying to take them along the journey. What I mean by that is showing them demos, showing them what things are going to look like while I'm building. I think that's one of the things I really learned is keeping them engaged. I share a lot of tips and tricks of what I'm doing, how to move faster through the system, little things that we notice to make their lives a little bit easier. But I think because the integration is seamless and pretty easy to use, it's really the training piece that's going to be a challenge. Making sure that you're documenting how it's specific to your organization and how we're using it so that people understand the process. If you have them understand the process and why we're doing things, it makes it a lot easier. And if you make it easy and fast for them, they're going to love it. So you're going to face a lot less roadblocks on that if you're getting people involved early and often.
And you had mentioned one thing, that if the setup is intuitive and seamless, then there's less chance of adoption issues or questions or confusion, right? They're not Sales is not asking you every day, how do I do something right now? Is that correct?
That's true. Um, and we are also communicating any updates because obviously when you roll something out, it may be your MVP version, it may be your version one. We're constantly trying to reiterate from things that we learn from how people are using it. So I could set something up, um, but if I'm not using it every day, it's hard for me or for myself to give advice on how to make it better. So I'm constantly listening to the team on, hey, this would make it a little bit easier for me. Or if they ask common questions, I'm trying to understand why and address those questions to make it easier.
Yes, education and making sure they're comfortable is one of the key things to ensure user adoption and success. If they don't know what's there or what they have to do, that causes confusion, frustration, and causes some roadblocks. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think that goes into Laura's questions as well that I see here. So the strategies or tools that are in place to ensure our contracts are executed efficiently and on time, we're documenting this. We're pulling reports to understand if they are on time and what on time means to our organization. So
Mhm.
are we trying to get this done within the same business day? Do we have a 3 to 5 day turnaround? What does that mean? So technically, we can have it completed in 5 minutes. Um, that's an average. That's not every time. But if we're able to do that, what are the outliers so that we understand what happened to those?
And there was a question about roadmap. Let me answer that too. What are the future enhancements, developments? I think, Laura, you're asking. On our side, at least well, there's probably a roadmap for Mandy of what she wants to set up and roll out to sales next year. But from a technology standpoint, um, we are constantly monitoring how customers are using the integration, and again, feedback from Mandy and other customers. We have quarterly roadmap and product review meetings. We have an executive advisory board. So we're not designing these enhancements in a silo. We're taking feedback from customers, but also watching the technology evolution. Where is Salesforce headed next year? Um, in terms of what they are going to evolve in their setup and new functionality, because we may want to leverage some of that on the Malbec side. There's definitely a lot of AI work this past year and upcoming year where Salesforce has its own, but Malbec has its own. And how can we take both to give sales users better insights using that capability? Um, so that's the other way that we manage enhancements. And then there's the little feature functions. So Mandy could be working with sales, and then sales will come up with a use case, and Mandy will file a request saying, I have all these options, but it would be great to have X, Y, Z. So now we take a look and see if it's a very unique scenario just for block users, or is that something common across customers? And then we prioritize and plan that enhancement. So different ways that our typical uh, you know, um, cloud product methodology works. But basically, it's based on feedback from live users and customers.
These are some great questions. I see
Um,
a question about contract visibility and accessibility for stakeholders. So with this integration for Salesforce, there is an iframe that sits inside of or I'm sorry, there's an iframe of Melbeck that sits directly in Salesforce. So if you are on the account or opportunity, you can work with your Salesforce team to determine where that iframe is going to sit. But if they scroll down on their order form or the opportunity at the account, wherever you want to place it, they're able to see the status directly there and click into Melbeck. It keeps them there. They're able to send things out. But the visibility is really being able to see the status along the way and being in your familiar systems, whether that's Salesforce or Melbeck. But they're able to see those reports that we discussed where we can create a report at any time, push data fields back, but they can also go into the iframe and open the contracts from there if they'd like. And you could choose the accessibilities for different stakeholders depending on what your business requirements are. So there's a lot of options for that.
And a lot of this, I know, many of you might be more visual folks. You want to see it because, of course, Mandy has proprietary setup for Square or Block. If you want to see a typical Salesforce CLM integration use case, certainly reach out to us. We can do a generic demo and show you the possibilities. I know Lizzie has put a link down. Even the QR code that we're sharing will take you to that page so that you can contact us for more information. I'm just scrolling up to see if we covered everything and make sure we've answered. I think Calvin Miller, you had a question, AI versus bot technology. So we have actually put a chatbot in beta in our own product. I'm sure Salesforce will have its own bot technologies to cover the sales use case. The difference being AI is designed to be proactive and tell you proactively what to look for in a contract review cycle or when a contract is coming up for renewal, or if you're deviating from your standards more often than not, things that are insightful for you to know. The bot technology is to make it easy for you to interact as an end user with the system. So rather than going to a report or searching for a contract, just typing out, tell me what contracts did we sign last week. Simple English basic questions will generate the search reporting in the background and present to you the data so that you're technically just conversing with the system through the bot and getting that information that you would otherwise have to go to a search screen or a reporting screen and pull it out yourself. Okay. I think that I've answered all of them. Mandy, any other thoughts before we wrap? I know we're up on time, so I want to be mindful of everyone's questions or mindful of everyone's time.
There was one more question about cost savings or ROI. So I'm not able to share our organization's cost savings or ROI numbers, but I will say that that's going to look different for every company based on how you're doing things today and how you're using technology to help you do things faster. But if you're putting a dollar amount or an assumption of a dollar amount behind someone's time, you're going to be able to calculate that pretty easily. And with something like CLM, it's going to have those benefits and more. When you're able to track renewal dates, termination dates, cost negotiations over time. I think my only final thoughts is it's always great to get amazing questions about CLM. It's one of my favorite topics, and I always enjoy presenting with you, Matt.
Thank you, Mandy. Always a pleasure. Love the energy and the passion and solving business challenges through technology, right? And there's so much more potential in the future. So with that, thank you everyone for your time today and the hour with us. Very insightful, Mandy, as always. And we look forward to hearing from many of you later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.